Let me tell you something most people don't want to hear. When someone walks away from you, it doesn't mean they forgot you. It doesn't mean you didn't matter. And it definitely doesn't mean the story is over. Because right before he comes back, there are signs. And they happen every single time. See, when a man leaves, he leaves with confidence. He thinks the grass is greener. He thinks freedom is sweeter. He thinks he made the right move. He walks away feeling powerful. But then life starts talking. At first, it's quiet. He enjoys the silence. He enjoys not being accountable. He enjoys not having to explain himself. But silence has a way of getting loud when you're alone with your thoughts. That's when it starts. Right before he comes back, he begins to compare. Not because he wants to, but because he can't help it. Every person he meets after you gets measured against what you gave him. Your patience, your loyalty, the way you showed up when things were hard. And suddenly what he thought was ordinary starts looking rare. Then comes the regret. Not the kind he admits out loud. Oh no, it's the quiet regret. The late night regret. The regret that hits when something goes wrong and you're not there to fix it. That's when he realizes you weren't just a woman in his life. You were the foundation. Let me tell you something real, something most people don't understand when a man walks away. When he leaves, it's not always because he's strong or certain or done. A lot of times he leaves because confidence is hiding confusion. He leaves thinking he knows exactly what he's doing. He tells himself he needs space, freedom, a new beginning. He convinces himself that walking away is power. But what he doesn't realize in that moment is that confidence built on impulse doesn't last. It only holds up until life starts asking questions he doesn't have answers for. At first, everything feels light. He feels relieved. There are no expectations, no responsibilities, no one checking in or holding him accountable. He enjoys the quiet, the open space, the feeling that he's in control again. He mistakes peace for emptiness and freedom for direction. And for a while, that illusion works. But time has a way of exposing what's real. Silence doesn't stay peaceful forever. Eventually, it gets loud. Eventually, it starts talking back. That's when confusion begins to creep in. It shows up late at night, when distractions run out and thoughts take over. It shows up when something goes wrong and there's no one there to stand beside him. That's when he starts replaying moments he once ignored. Conversations he didn't take seriously. Efforts he didn't appreciate. Love he assumed would always be there. What he once called too much starts to look like exactly what he needed. Before he even realizes what's happening, he starts comparing. Not intentionally, not proudly, but automatically. Every person he meets after you gets measured against what you gave. He compares the way they listened to the way you listened. He compares their patience to yours, their loyalty, their consistency, their presence. And no matter how hard he tries to avoid it, the truth keeps showing up. What he thought was common was actually rare. What he thought he could replace turns out not to be replaceable at all. That comparison slowly turns into regret. Not the kind he admits, not the kind he posts about or talks through with friends. It's a quiet regret, a private regret. The kind that lives in the chest and tightens when something reminds him of you. He starts realizing that you didn't just love him, you supported him. You didn't just stand beside him, you held things together when he didn't even notice they were falling apart. And that realization hurts because it comes with responsibility. It forces him to admit that leaving wasn't strength, it was avoidance. Right before he comes back, another thing happens. He starts watching you, maybe from a distance, maybe in silence, maybe through a screen. He notices the way you carry yourself now, the way your energy has shifted, the way you smile differently. And what shakes him the most isn't the idea that you were hurt. It's the realization that you healed, that you grew, that you learned how to be okay without him. Nothing confuses a man more than seeing the person he thought he broke become stronger without him. Nothing humbles him faster than realizing the world didn't stop spinning when he walked away. He starts questioning his decision. He starts wondering if he made the biggest mistake of his life. And that's when the urge to return shows up, not always out of love, but out of awareness. Awareness of loss, awareness of value, awareness that what he walked away from wasn't ordinary at all. But here's the part most people don't talk about. Just because he realizes your worth doesn't mean he's ready to protect it. Just because he misses you doesn't mean he's changed. Sometimes people come back because they're lonely, not because they've grown. Sometimes they return because life got hard, not because they finally learned how to love better. And in that moment, the power is no longer in his hands. It's in yours. Because growth changes you. Healing changes your standards. The version of you that waited, that begged, that hoped no longer exists. You've learned what it feels like to stand on your own, to choose yourself, to build peace without permission. And when he shows up again, the question isn't whether he deserves another chance. The real question is whether he fits into the life you worked so hard to create without him. Sometimes losing someone is the lesson. Sometimes their return is the test. And the strongest thing you can ever do is recognize that you don't need someone to come back in order to feel complete. When you reach that point, you've already won. When a man walks away, it rarely looks the way people imagine it does. From the outside, it seems decisive, confident, final. He looks like someone who knows exactly what he wants and exactly where he's going. But what most people don't see is that leaving is often easier than staying and facing responsibility. Walking away doesn't always mean he was sure. Many times it means he was overwhelmed, afraid of what commitment was asking from him, or uncomfortable with the mirror that love was holding up to his flaws. At first, leaving feels like relief. There are no conversations to navigate, no emotions to manage, no expectations to meet. He tells himself he needed space, that he was losing himself, that distance will bring clarity. And for a moment, that story makes sense. He enjoys the freedom of doing whatever he wants, whenever he wants. He confuses the absence of pressure with peace, and he mistakes loneliness for independence. But freedom without direction doesn't last. Eventually, the quiet becomes uncomfortable. As time passes, life starts filling the gaps he thought he escaped. Problems don't disappear just because you're alone. Bills still come. Stress still shows up. Failures still hurt. And now there's no one there to share the weight. That's when he starts remembering the things he took for granted. Not the arguments, not the tension, but the support. The way you showed up even when it was inconvenient. The way you believed in him when he doubted himself. The way you stayed when leaving would have been easier. Without meaning to, he starts comparing his present to his past. Every new connection gets measured against the standard you unknowingly set. He notices how shallow conversations feel, how inconsistent affection becomes exhausting, how rare it is to find someone who actually cares about his well-being, not just what he can provide or how he makes them feel in the moment. And slowly, the illusion he created about life being better without you starts to crack. That comparison leads him to regret, but not the dramatic kind. It's subtle. It shows up when something good happens and there's no one to celebrate with. It shows up when something goes wrong and there's no one to call. He starts realizing that what he lost wasn't just a relationship. It was stability. It was partnership. It was someone who saw him fully and still chose to stay. And that realization is heavy because it comes with the understanding that he may not find that again so easily. Right before he considers coming back, he becomes aware of you in a new way. He notices your absence more clearly than your presence ever was. He hears your name and it hits differently. He sees a reminder and it lingers longer. And if he sees that you're doing well, that you're moving forward, that you're not stuck in the pain he caused, it unsettles him. Your growth becomes proof that you were never the problem. And that's a hard truth to sit with. Seeing you evolve forces him to reflect on himself. He starts questioning why he couldn't do the same when you were together, why he resisted growth instead of embracing it. why he ran instead of building. And that self-reflection is uncomfortable because it removes excuses. It exposes that leaving wasn't about you lacking something, but about him not being ready to rise to what you deserve. That's when the desire to return begins. Not always because he has transformed, but because he finally understands what he lost. He reaches a point where he realizes that comfort doesn't come from novelty and fulfillment doesn't come from running. He starts believing that going back might fix the emptiness he feels now. But understanding loss and learning how to love are not the same thing. The truth is, someone can miss you deeply and still not be capable of showing up the way you need. They can recognize your value and still not know how to protect it. And by the time he reaches this realization, you may already be standing somewhere different. You may have learned how to be okay without answers, without closure, without him. You may have grown into a version of yourself that no longer settles for potential or promises. At that point, the balance shifts. His return is no longer about whether he wants you back. It becomes about whether he can meet you where you are now, because the version of you that once waited has changed. You've seen what life looks like when you choose yourself, and that knowledge is powerful. It teaches you that love should add to your life, not to stabilize it. And once you understand that, you don't chase someone who had to lose you to see your worth. When someone leaves your life, it doesn't happen in one clean moment. It unfolds in layers, and most of those layers are invisible at first. When a man decides to walk away, he usually does it believing he's protecting himself. He tells himself the relationship was too heavy, too demanding, or too complicated. He convinces himself that distance will make things clearer and that life will feel easier once he's free. In that moment, he feels justified. He feels like he chose himself. What he doesn't realize is that choosing escape and choosing growth are two very different things. At the beginning, the absence feels refreshing. There's no emotional weight to carry, no difficult conversations waiting at the end of the day. He enjoys the idea of starting over, the fantasy that something better is waiting just around the corner. He keeps himself busy, surrounds himself with noise, and avoids stillness. As long as he stays distracted, he doesn't have to face the truth. But distraction has an expiration date. Eventually, the noise fades, and when it does, the thoughts he's been avoiding show up uninvited. That's when memory starts working against him. Not the painful moments, but the meaningful ones. He remembers how you understood him without him having to explain himself. How you noticed when something was wrong, even when he said he was fine. How you stayed steady when things got uncertain. These memories surface quietly, often at the worst possible times, and they force him to confront a truth he tried to outrun. What he left behind wasn't a burden, it was support. Without realizing it, he begins measuring everything against you. Conversations feel hollow, connections feel temporary. The excitement of something new fades faster than he expected, and what's left is a sense of emptiness he can't explain. He starts to understand that what he called boredom was actually stability, and what he called pressure was actually accountability. That realization doesn't come easily because it requires him to admit that he misjudged what he had. As this awareness grows, so does regret. It doesn't arrive all at once. It builds slowly in moments of silence, in the spaces where your presence used to exist. He feels it when he has a bad day and there's no one who truly understands his struggles. He feels it when he achieves something and realizes there's no one who cares in the way you did. Regret becomes heavier when he understands that you gave him loyalty in a world that rarely offers it, and he didn't know how to value it when it mattered. Right before he thinks about coming back, something shifts. He sees you differently, not as someone he once had, but as someone he may have lost forever. If he notices that you're moving forward, that you're healing, that you're no longer defined by the pain he caused, it shakes him. Your strength becomes a mirror, reflecting the ways he stayed the same. He realizes that while he was running, you were growing. That awareness brings fear Fear that he missed his chance. Fear that you've outgrown him. Fear that the door he walked out of may no longer be open. And fear has a way of motivating action. That's when the idea of returning becomes tempting. Not necessarily because he's transformed, but because he wants relief from the weight of regret. He wants to feel familiar comfort again. He wants to undo a decision that now feels rushed and immature. But wanting comfort is not the same as being prepared to change. Understanding your value doesn't automatically mean he knows how to honor it. By the time he reaches this point, you may no longer be standing in the same place emotionally. You've had time to reflect, to heal, to rebuild. You've learned what it feels like to choose yourself without guilt. And that growth changes everything. The version of you that once waited for clarity now understands that silence is also an answer. The version of you that once hoped he would realize your worth now knows that real love doesn't require loss to create appreciation. And when you reach that level of understanding, his return becomes less powerful because you've already discovered something more important than being chosen again. You've discovered what it feels like to choose yourself. When he leaves, it usually feels sudden to you, but for him, it's something he's been rehearsing in his mind long before he actually walks away. He tells himself stories to justify it. He says the timing is wrong, the connection is fading, the pressure is too much. What he doesn't admit is that staying would require him to grow, and growth can be uncomfortable. Leaving feels easier than facing the parts of himself that the relationship was exposing. So he convinces himself that distance will solve what effort could have fixed. In the beginning, he feels light. There's a sense of release that comes with not being accountable to anyone else's emotions. He can come and go as he pleases, make decisions without explaining them, live without compromise. He mistakes this lack of responsibility for freedom. And for a while, that illusion holds. He laughs more, goes out more, distracts himself with new faces and new environments. But what he doesn't realize is that freedom without connection eventually starts to feel empty. As the days pass, the excitement fades. The novelty wears off. And slowly, he starts noticing the things that are missing. Not the arguments or the disagreements, but the quiet support. The comfort of being understood. The feeling of being chosen every day, even when things weren't perfect. He begins to realize that what he lost wasn't control, it was consistency. And consistency is hard to replace. Without trying to, he starts comparing. Every interaction reminds him of something you used to do better. The way you listened without judgment. The way you cared without keeping score. The way you showed up, even when it cost you something. These comparisons are frustrating because they don't allow him to move forward cleanly. The past keeps inserting itself into his present, asking questions he doesn't want to answer. That's when regret begins to settle in. It's quiet and persistent. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It shows up late at night when distractions no longer work. It shows up when something goes wrong, and he realizes there's no one who truly has his back. He starts to understand that you weren't just part of his life, you were a stabilizing force. And losing that feels heavier than he expected. Right before he considers coming back, he notices you again. Not in the way he did when he left, but with clarity. He sees your growth, your strength, your ability to move forward without him. And that realization is uncomfortable because it challenges the belief that he was the center of your world. Seeing you stand on your own forces him to confront the truth that you were never dependent, just devoted. That devotion is what he now recognizes as rare. He understands that loyalty like yours isn't guaranteed. And once it's lost, it's not easily replaced. This understanding creates urgency. He feels the pull to return, to fix what he broke, to reclaim what he now sees clearly. But urgency doesn't equal readiness. Wanting something back doesn't mean he's prepared to protect it differently. By this time, you're no longer the same person he left. You've had time to sit with the pain, to process it, to learn from it. You've discovered what it feels like to be whole on your own. And that self-awareness shifts the balance. His return no longer defines your worth. It simply reveals his realization. You reach a point where you understand that love should feel safe, steady, and mutual. You understand that being chosen late is not the same as being chosen fully. And with that understanding, the power quietly changes hands. You no longer wait for someone to come back to confirm your value, because you've already claimed it for yourself. When he walks away, it often feels like everything collapsed at once. But the truth is he didn't leave because you were lacking. He left because staying would have required him to become more than he was ready to be. Relationships have a way of exposing immaturity, fear, and unresolved wounds, and instead of confronting those things, some people choose distance. Leaving feels like control. It feels like a way to breathe without having to change. In that moment, he convinces himself that walking away is strength, when in reality it's avoidance dressed up as confidence. At first, life without you feels simple. There's no emotional responsibility, no need to explain his choices, no pressure to show up consistently. He enjoys the space, the quiet, the ability to move without considering anyone else. He fills his time with distractions, telling himself he's happier now. But distractions don't heal anything. They only delay the moment when reality catches up, and eventually, it always does. As time passes, the excitement fades. The freedom he thought he wanted starts to feel hollow. The silence becomes uncomfortable. That's when he starts remembering the things he once overlooked. The way you supported him without expecting perfection. The way you stayed patient when he struggled. The way you believed in him even when he doubted himself. These memories surface quietly, and they don't go away easily. They linger, forcing him to confront the truth that what he had with you wasn't ordinary. Without intending to, he begins comparing his present to his past. New people feel temporary. Conversations feel shallow. The connection he once took for granted now feels impossible to replace. He realizes that what he called boredom was actually stability, and what he called pressure was actually care. This understanding is uncomfortable because it requires him to admit that he misjudged the situation. It means accepting that he walked away from something valuable without fully understanding its worth. Regret grows slowly. It's not dramatic or loud, but it's persistent. It shows up when he has a bad day, and there's no one who truly understands him. It shows up when something good happens, and he realizes there's no one who celebrates his wins the way you did. He starts to see that you weren't just part of his life, you were someone who anchored him. Losing that creates a kind of emptiness that distractions can't fill. Right before he considers coming back, he becomes aware of you again, not as someone he left behind, but as someone who has moved forward. He notices your strength, your independence, the way you've rebuilt yourself. And what unsettles him most is realizing that you didn't fall apart without him. You adapted, you grew, you learned how to be okay on your own. That realization forces him to question his decision and his role in your story. Seeing your growth brings both admiration and fear. Admiration for the strength you found, and fear that you may no longer need him. He starts to worry that the door he walked out of has closed. That fear creates urgency, and urgency can look like change even when it isn't. He feels pulled to return, to fix things, to reconnect with the familiarity he now understands he lost. But by this time, you are no longer the person who would accept words without action. You've learned what it means to value your peace. You've learned that love should feel secure, not uncertain. The experience of losing him taught you something important about yourself, and that knowledge changed your standards. His return, or even the idea of it, no longer defines your happiness. You reach a place where you understand that someone coming back is not proof of love, but proof of realization. And realization that comes after loss often arrives too late. Because once you've learned how to choose yourself, you don't easily return to situations that required you to feel small, unsure, or unappreciated. When he leaves, it can feel like the ground disappeared beneath your feet, But for him, it often feels like relief, not because you were the problem, but because staying would have forced him to face parts of himself he wasn't ready to confront. Commitment has a way of demanding honesty, consistency, and emotional maturity. And when someone doesn't yet have those things, they look for exits instead of solutions. Walking away becomes the easiest option, and he convinces himself that distance will bring peace. In the early days, he feels free. There's no emotional weight, no expectations to live up to, no one asking him to show up fully. He enjoys the quiet, the independence, the ability to move through life without answering to anyone else. He tells himself this is what he needed all along. But what he doesn't realize is that freedom without purpose quickly turns into emptiness. The excitement fades and the silence starts to echo. As time goes on, life reminds him that being alone doesn't mean being fulfilled. Problems still arise. Stress still finds him. And now there's no one to lean on. That's when memories of you begin to surface, uninvited and persistent. He remembers the way you listened when he was overwhelmed, the way you stood by him when things were uncertain, the way you made space for his flaws without excusing them. Those memories carry weight because they reveal what he lost, not what he escaped. Without intending to, he begins comparing everything to what he once had. New connections don't feel as deep. Conversations lack meaning. The comfort he assumed he could find anywhere proves to be rare. He starts to understand that what he called routine was actually reliability, and what he called pressure was someone caring enough to expect more from him. That realization is uncomfortable because it requires accountability. Regret doesn't rush in all at once. It builds slowly, quietly. It shows up in moments of loneliness, in the absence of someone who truly understood him. He begins to see that you weren't just part of his life. You were someone who added stability and direction. Losing that leaves a gap that distractions can't fill. And for the first time, he questions whether leaving was the right choice. Right before he considers coming back, something shifts inside him. He becomes aware of your presence in his absence. He notices how you've grown, how you've adapted, how you found strength without him. And what unsettles him most is realizing that you didn't stay stuck in the pain. You moved forward. You became stronger. That growth challenges the narrative he told himself when he left. Seeing you thrive creates a mix of emotions: pride, longing, regret, and fear all at once. Fear that you no longer need him. Fear that the door he closed behind him won't open again. That fear creates urgency, and urgency can look like change even when it's not fully real. He feels the pull to return, hoping to regain what he now understands was valuable. But by the time he reaches this point, you are no longer the same person. You've had time to heal, to reflect, to rebuild your sense of self. You've learned what it feels like to choose peace over chaos, clarity over confusion. The version of you that once waited for him to realize your worth has evolved. You now understand that love should feel secure and mutual, not uncertain and one-sided. In this space, his return loses its power because you've already discovered something more important than being chosen again. You've discovered what it means to stand firm in your own value. And once you reach that place, you don't need someone to come back to confirm what you already know.